There are many different ways to talk about the very important contrast in this election between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. You have the criminal versus the prosecutor. You have the crazy versus the incredibly competent and successful. But you also have the past versus the future. Donald Trump is caught up not only in the past because of his attachment to his grievances and his complaints and his whining that he always drones on and on about in every single speech or Truth Social post, but he is also the past because we have seen his administration, we've seen it fail, and we know the policies that he wants to pull us back into. We know the past he wants to bring back. We know he doesn't want to just push us back to 4 years ago when he was failing as being president, but he wants to push us back 40, 50, 60 years ago with his policies. Strip away a woman's right to choose even more so than he already has. Restrict even more civil liberties and fundamental freedoms. That is the difference in this campaign. And so when we're talking about the difference, I think that is one of the most important contrasts that we can make. And it was made when Donald Trump was speaking to the New York Economic Club today, and he was confronted on stage about some policy that he really doesn't have about how we will protect our future. And he really just kind of imploded, crumbled, unable to answer, as you can expect. Not a lot of thought going on up there. But before we get to that, I want to show a couple of clips that I think add some context to where Donald Trump is at in this race.
Kamala is also vowing to raise the corporate tax rate from 21 to 28%. We're bringing it down to 15%. But she really is looking to...
No surprise that the pretend billionaire is still talking about the giant tax cuts that he wants to hand out to his wealthy donors, to big corporations, and of course himself with whatever money he has left at this point after all the lawsuits and legal fees. But what's very important in what Donald Trump is talking about is I don't hear anything in there about working families. I don't hear anything there about working Americans. Donald Trump pretends to be this hero for the working class, but of course that is never reflected in his agenda or his policy proposals, and that's incredibly clear in what he says right here.
The fifth pillar of my plan is to make the Trump tax cuts permanent. They are massive tax cuts, biggest ever, permanent. And to cut taxes even more. And
Donald Trump wants to make his tax cuts, the tax cuts that cost thousands of dollars every year for middle-class Americans, he wants those to be even more. He wants middle-class Americans, working families, to bear even more of the brunt of his giant tax cuts for his rich friends. That's his focus. It's not the future. It's not on working families. And that is why he was confronted with this question about childcare. And again, just completely crumbled because he couldn't give an answer because he does not care about the future.
If you win in November, can you commit to prioritizing legislation to make childcare affordable? And if so, what specific piece of legislation will you advance?
Well, I would do that. And we're sitting down, I was... we had Senator Marco Rubio, and my daughter Ivanka was so impactful on that issue. It's a very important issue. But I think when you talk about the kind of numbers that I'm talking about, that, because look, childcare is childcare. There's something, you have to have it. In this country, you have to have it. But when you talk about those numbers compared to the kind of numbers that I'm talking about by taxing foreign nations at levels that they're not used to, but they'll get used to it very quickly. And it's not going to stop them from doing business with us, but they'll have a very substantial tax when they send product into our country. Those numbers are so much bigger than any numbers that we're talking about, including childcare, that it's going to take care. We're going to have, I look forward to having no deficits within a fairly short period of time, coupled with the reductions that I told you about on waste and fraud and all of the other things that are going on in our country. Because I have to stay with childcare. I want to stay with childcare, but those numbers are small relative to the kind of economic numbers that I'm talking about, including growth, but growth also headed up by what the plan is that I just told you about. We're going to be taking in trillions of dollars.
We know Trump's advisors want him talking about the economy more because he's actually just come out and said, oh, they don't want me to focus on personal attacks, but I'm going to do it anyways. But it's clear none of that is breaking through in any real way. And he doesn't have anything to talk about when it comes to economic policy besides complaining and lying about the booming Biden-Harris economy. But he just kept repeating the word numbers. He said that he has great numbers and we're going to get the numbers and the numbers are going to be up. and we're going to talk about the numbers. And it seems like he was alluding to the policy of tariffs that he wants to implement, which really just effectively work as a tax on working people. And so I don't know how Donald Trump is going to tariff his way to childcare. But again, it is his complete lack of focus on the future and his complete locked-in focus to his grievance in the past and his anger and his complaints that are really driving this campaign. And it paid such an important contrast, especially with J.D. Vance as his running mate, someone who has attacked families of all different kinds, shapes, and sizes, and has said that people who don't have kids are less than. Well, JD, did you ever consider how expensive it might be and difficult to have children? No, you didn't. And you also didn't work to solve that problem. And you're not trying to. And JD Vance was asked a similar question about childcare, and his response was just as bad right here.
What can we do about lowering the cost of daycare? Hayden, obviously a working family, and it's very hard for working families to get by. How will we lower the cost of daycare?
Such an important question, Charlie. And I think one of the things that we can do is make it easier for family models to choose, or for families to choose whatever model they want, right? So one of the ways that you might be able to relieve a little bit of pressure on people who are paying so much for daycare is make it so that maybe like grandma or grandpa wants to help out a little bit more, or maybe there's an aunt or uncle that wants to help out a little bit more. If that happens, you relieve some of the pressure on all the resources that we're spending in daycare. Now, you talk about just daycare. Let's say you don't have somebody who can provide that extra set of hands.
This really just goes to show that all of Donald Trump and J.D. Vance's attacks on Kamala Harris, which are just so stupid that she isn't putting forth enough policy, reveal themselves to be so ridiculous because J.D. Vance wants to rail against people who don't have children, but his solution to childcare and its cost is, oh, well, just get your grandparents to help out. I'm sure that anyone who is struggling to afford childcare has already thought that, but maybe they don't live close enough to a family member. Maybe their family members are no longer with them. Maybe their family members aren't able to take care of someone else, much less themselves, and Donald Trump making sure that prescription drug prices stay high under his administration didn't help out with that either. These are people with no consideration for how anyone else's lives or the lives of those around them are in any way that they can possibly help them. They just want to attack and complain and push their grievance every single day. This is all we see. Again, it's the difference between the past, the anger, and the future and the joy. We understand that these are difficult problems to solve, but Kamala Harris and Tim Walz actually want to solve them. That's the difference here, that they know that the problems are going to be tough, but they want to do it with joy, that governing can be a good thing because it can actually impact people's lives in a real substantive way instead of just complaining that someone doesn't live the life that you would want from them. And that's what J.D. Vance and Donald Trump want to do. They want to attack and complain, while Kamala Harris and Tim Walz want to work to solve problems. And that is, of course, clear of our present, but also so clear of our future that they don't care, and that is so evident right here.
We have to be very, very careful because the destructive capability of nuclear, when people talk about global warming, I say the ocean is going to go down 1/100th of an inch within the next 400 years. That's not our problem. Our problem is nuclear warming, and we better be smart, and we better have smart people.
As a young person, as a member of Gen Z, climate change is obviously an incredibly important issue to us. And in the wake of the heartbreaking school shooting that happened yesterday in Georgia, Donald Trump's response of climate change isn't our problem, in the same way that he told us to get over school shootings, to get over gun violence being the #1 cause of death amongst kids in America, it just goes to show what I've been talking about this whole video. They don't care about the future. They're not worried. Donald Trump doesn't care because he's not going to be around, and all he's ever focused on is himself. That's their position. They think they're fine. They don't care. Why would he? A complete narcissist only focused on himself. And it's an important point that I want to continue to drive home because, again, it reflects the contrast in this race, which is what we need to continue to talk about. Don't we want someone in the White House who is actually focused on us and not just themselves? Don't we want someone who's running to make the country better, not running to avoid prison? Because again, that is what is at the heart of this campaign for Donald Trump. It is the past, it is grievance, and it is about avoiding jail time. and I think it's time for some accountability. And if you do as well, and you want to support the work that we're doing on this show, as always, you can hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Over 70% of people watching these videos aren't subscribed, so go ahead and subscribe. And if you enjoyed this video, you can also leave a like, drop a blue heart in the comments, and if you want to go an extra step further in supporting the work that we're doing on this show, as always, you can click that join button to become a monthly member. As a college student doing the show at school, it really goes a long way to support us. And until next time, I'll see you soon.